My house has a detached garage, and out of the garage is a long driveway with a basketball hoop right next to it. I also want to add that you can't see past the middle of the driveway from in the house. So, when I was about 6 years old, my brother, who was 9 at the time, was shooting hoops, and I'm just kind of watching him and just wandering around. I'm standing toward the end of the driveway about 10 feet away from the road. A very stereotypical white pedo van with the windows blacked out then pulls up to the end of the driveway, and a bald man rolls down the window. My brother didn't see what was going on because he's pretty distracted shooting hoops and I'm out of his peripheral. This man then asks if I would like some candy, and me not having the stranger danger talk yet, I say yes and start walking towards his van. My brother now noticed the car pulled up and then turns and sees me walking towards it. He sprints down the driveway, grabs my hand, and tells me to run inside. We both start running down the driveway and then go into the garage. We close the garage door and run inside. We tell my mom immediately, and she runs outside to get the plate number. As she got outside, the guy had already closed the door and starts speeding off. My brother and I didn't even know how he got out of the car, which makes the door closing even scarier. At the time, I didn't really get what was wrong, but I did get the stranger danger talk right after that. I'm still very grateful for my brother to this day, because if not for him, I could have possibly been kidnapped. Very scary experience looking back, and I'm really glad nothing happened. I'm a 5'3" girl living in New York City and working a night job. I usually end up getting off work at around 3 a.m., and there aren't many people getting off at my train stop. But the train rides have a decent amount of people. Lately, within the last 4 or 5 months, I've seen a larger amount of people hanging around the streets in my neighborhood, and I've been coming home at this time for about a year now. There's more and more reports of missing people in New York City, so naturally, my parents are pretty worried about my safety. Usually when I'm a few stops away on the train, I'll call my dad and he'll meet me on the corner of my block. When I get off the train, I have to walk down a block and turn the corner to walk a little bit more before I get to my house. So, one night as I'm coming from the platform, I then see a man across the street a few feet away from the curb from where I was headed. I was very wary of him, but at this time I'm pretty wary of everyone, so I decided to keep my eyes on him. The light then changed, signaling my turn to walk, so I crossed the street and this man hasn't moved from this little area yet. He's moving around but looking like he has no real destination. So the moment I pass him, I then notice from the corner of my eyes that he's now headed right towards me at full speed. I got nervous because my dad hadn't turned the corner yet, so I started walking pretty fast, fearing the worst while he's still following in my direction. Finally, when I begin to reach the middle, I see my dad turn and I make it a big point to wave with my whole arm. So if the man behind me was aiming to get me, he at least knew I would be with someone else. I continued to keep my pace, however, just in case he was still trying. I finally reached my dad and we turned the corner together. Once we reached my gate, I then turned around and I noticed that the man wasn't wearing a jacket during the winter, and he might have been homeless. He started walking back the same way he came. That's when I realized that if my dad hadn't have been there, I might have gotten robbed or even worse. I also want to add that I'm not trying to say that all homeless people are threatening or trying to rob you, but I just got a really weird vibe from when I first saw him. My intuitions and judgments haven't failed me yet, so I'm really glad I listened to them. Just down the road from where a few years ago I had previously lived in Southeast Australia is the opening into about 100 acres of woodlands and bush that I frequently went into when I was younger, to do the usual things: riding, camping, etc. I was out driving at around 11:30 p.m. with my girlfriend, and as we were in the area, decided to show her the woodlands while we were in the area, as she loves everything to do with nature, and it was also summer, so it was an extremely warm night. I left my car with the light shining into the trees, as we weren't going too far in and it was pitch black inside. The two of us just kind of sat there just chatting, having a smoke, and generally relaxing. She was sitting on sort of a map of the area that had been put in a plastic bag, and I was keeping an eye on the trees as I had a weird feeling that something was just wrong. I've read on here a few people that have said that they have felt like they were in danger, although nothing around them was off, and I had this same feeling. Every sense was almost reaching out, and my adrenaline was sky high, but there wasn't really anything in my eyeline that seemed any different. After lighting another cigarette to calm my nerves, I scanned the tree line once more and realized that it looked different than before. It was only after starting into the dark that I saw that there was now moonlight lighting up the grass where it wasn't before, and there was now a black shape now blocking it that before I thought was a tree. I've got goosebumps just typing this. The only way to describe it was that literally all of the sound just ceased and everything went dead silent, and a few seconds later, this disgusting feeling of dread fell over me. I then saw motion in the dark of the path as this thing started crawling towards us. It was on all fours. I've seen nearly every animal in the outback here, and we don't have any large predators like this in the United States or Europe. But somehow I just knew this thing was a predator, and it wasn't hiding itself from us, but just slowly crawling towards us. I'm not really sure if my girlfriend saw it or not, as I couldn't look away. But just as it reached the line that my car lights were able to illuminate, it then reared up onto two legs and just started staring at us. Now, I'm 6'4", and this thing was about another meter larger than me, with arms that were far too long that nearly reached down near the ground. All I could make out of it was an off-white, almost yellowish fur on it, and in the dim light, all I could really make out was the silhouette of his head. The only way I can describe what it looked like is it kind of reminded me of a dog or a wolf. I wasn't able to move as it stared at me, but it was at this point that my girlfriend then gasped, which seemed to break off whatever was stopping me from thinking logically. I then grabbed my girlfriend by the arm and then sprinted to my car. I slammed the doors and then tore out of there as fast as I could. Both of us way too scared to speak until about a half an hour later. We've both discussed it many times. The feeling that we had was what I imagine is what a rabbit sees when it catches a wolf or fox looking at it. Just knowing you're its prey. That this is something that would be able to end us with absolute ease if it wanted to. Neither of us have been able to come up with any kind of explanation for what it was, but it's definitely changed the way I view the woods and bush, as well as when I go camping and hiking now. I sometimes think back to that and wonder what it was and if I will ever see anything like that ever again. I just don't know. This happened about 2 to 3 years ago, but I still think about it every now and then when I'm walking alone and no one's around. I was volunteering at a school in a rural area about 3 kilometers from my home. I didn't know how to drive and I have an irrational fear of biking, so I didn't really mind walking home every Wednesday. I was 19 years old at the time, but I know that I looked at least 3 years younger. It was winter, it was cold, and it was raining, and I had no umbrella. It's fine though. I really liked the rain and I was covered from head to toe, so I still enjoyed my peaceful walk with my music blasting through my earphones. But as I was walking, I saw something in my peripheral vision that I was always scared to see in a situation like this. There was a car slowing down, following me. I didn't know what to do. I tried not to assume the worst, and I turned to see whether that was the only car on that road or if there were potential witnesses in case something happened. Nope. Just this one car following me. There was no one else around as far as my eyes could see. Then, the driver lowers his window and I see his face. An old man. Seems to take care of himself, not weak-looking, and his eyes were completely fixed on me. The conversation went as followed.
"Where are you going? Would you like me to take you somewhere?"
I take off my earphones. Huh? I had heard him because at that point I had already turned the music down to be more aware of my surroundings. Plus, despite not wanting to assume the worst, I still wanted to buy some time to think of an out. Where can I run? Can someone hear me if I scream? Can anyone else see us? Where can I get help? Well, there was really no one around and nowhere to run or hide. Now, I was walking in this very rural area on the side of this road that had a field on one side and then woods on the other. There was just one abandoned house up ahead. So I tried to reason with myself. This man is probably just concerned that I'm visibly walking a long distance, right? Oh, no thanks, I'm fine. I really like walking.
"Oh, no, I don't care about that. I just want you to get in the car."
What? Maybe he's concerned because it's raining and I don't have an umbrella. No thanks. I know it's raining, but I like the rain, so I'm alright.
"No, I don't think you get it. I don't care. I just want you to get in the car. Now. I'll drive you wherever you need to go."
For heaven's sake, really? I'm giving this potential kidnapper 2 excuses and he doesn't take them? His intentions are becoming clearer and clearer. I can't ignore this anymore. And he never once breaks eye contact. It's like he's analyzing my every move and reaction. I'm also starting to notice that his smile is starting to become more sinister as well. Is it just my fear tricking me? This whole time I'm trying to look as friendly and as naive as possible because I don't want him to realize that he can't trick me into getting to his car, and his only choice would be to use force. Remember, no one can hear me if I scream.
"Listen, I just want to talk to you. Can I?"
Well, alright, what is it?
No, I mean, I want to talk to you properly. Get in the car. I just want to talk to you.
That's the only moment when he breaks eye contact, and it's to slowly look at me from head to toe.
"Well, you know what? How about I park a little bit further and you can join me to have a chat?"
Sure. I don't know if you'll find a place to park anywhere close, but go ahead if you want, sir. I'm only walking straight anyway.
"Perfect. See you there?"
Yes, sir. He then smiles and drives away. I wait for his car to be far enough so he can't see me, and then I immediately run towards the abandoned house to hide while I then make a call to my mom for her to come get me. The police wouldn't really do anything since I'm not in immediate danger. We've tried to call them once after some serious threats from a stalker, and they just told us to only call them if the stalker was on our property. Anyways, I explain everything to my mom and she tells me to send her a screenshot of Google Maps with my exact location, just in case something happens, and that I need to stay hidden while keeping an eye on the road to see if that man's car appears again. I'm about to end the call when I then see his car drive by yet again. And what do I see? He's looking right at me, as if he already knew exactly where I was hiding. He just starts waving at me with a creepy smile plastered all over his face, and still with this trying very hard to seem friendly vibe. He knows I'm hiding and on a call with someone now. He knows that I wasn't as naive as I pretended to be. Then he just drives away. My mom is still on the phone with me, so I tell her what just happened and she tells me to try and stay calm and just wait for her. We end the call and I wait. Fortunately for me, he doesn't come back. My mom's car finally appears and much faster than I anticipated. I get inside and we go home. I still can't wrap my head around what exactly happened and what could have happened. Sir, whoever you are, no matter what your intentions were, I really hope I don't encounter you again while walking. Please, if you happen to see me again, please do not approach me. I met this girl who we'll call Elle in an online chat room, and I really hit it off with her. She was literally everything I ever wanted in a woman, except for one thing. Elle lived in Portugal, over 3,500 miles away from where I lived in the US. We got pretty close though, despite the distance, and decided we wanted to make a go of it. And so we entered into this long-distance relationship. A few months later, and I got a new paying job, planning to use the extra funds to save up to go and meet Elle in person one day. Instead, however, I met this girl that we'll call Alice at my job. We worked in a factory where you would work on two-person teams on a single machine. The teams would vary, so one day you would be working with person X on machine 4, and the next with person Y on machine 2. I've been with the company for a couple of weeks and got assigned to work with her, and for the most part, we got along pretty fine. We made idle, mundane conversation as we worked, as one does, talking about nothing serious when, out of the blue, she asked me if I was single. I responded that I wasn't and that I'd been dating this girl Elle for a few months, and just left it at that, thinking I'd put the kibosh on whatever she was thinking may happen between us. The conversation went on pretty mundane as ever when she mentioned her boyfriend, and I thought maybe she didn't have any ideas about anything after all, and perhaps she was just being nosy. Our shift ended, and as such, so did the awkward conversation. Over the next little while we worked together again off and on, at one point she asked if she could add me on social media. I told her sure, not really thinking much of it. That is, until the next day at work, when she mentioned some post that she had read on Elle's wall that I hadn't seen or could find. I asked her where she had seen it, and she said it was an older post. The post was from 7 years previous. I asked Alice if she had gone through Elle's entire history, and she said yeah, and that she was bored and had nothing else to do. So after going through mine, she decided to go through Elle's as well. Now, that kind of set off some alarm bells in my head, because who the heck goes through the entire post history of a complete stranger in a single night? I guess my face showed my thoughts, because she quickly apologized and stated that she didn't mean to be so over the top about it, but we post so rarely that she would go through just a few and suddenly find herself looking at years old posts. This wasn't untrue and so seemed pretty reasonable, but still kinda weird, as she had no connection whatsoever to Elle, and so she had no business on her timeline. I mentioned it to Elle later that day and helped adjust her privacy settings so it couldn't happen again. A bit later on then, I was working with Alice again, and the conversation was yet again pretty fairly mundane, when all of a sudden this guy walked over to our machine and then just stood there glaring at us. First just her for a while, then me, then back at her, and etc. etc. After about 20 minutes, there was a call over the intercom and he then sauntered off to answer it. Alice then looked like she was about to cry after that, and it was fairly creepy, so I decided to ask her what it was all about. Well, turns out that guy was her boyfriend and they had just broken up. I made the stupid mistake of asking if she was okay, just trying to be polite while secretly hoping she wouldn't go into detail about it, which of course she unfortunately did. As it so happens, he had repeatedly told her from day one that after a bit of divorce he just wasn't really interested in a monogamous relationship, and that he really just wanted something open. No strings attached, no commitments, and absolutely no expectations. She then confided in me that she did want those things and just went along with them since she could see his potential as a husband from day one, just like she could me. And there went those alarm bells yet again. Anyways, he was apparently pretty serious about wanting an open relationship, because he'd actually gone behind her back and signed them up for a swingers weekend a couple of cities over. When she'd found that out, she said no and that she wasn't ready for that yet, but agreed to have sex with a guy that her boyfriend knew while he watched, right after he had just dropped into the conversation how he'd helped a woman down the street move in and there was apparently definitely a spark. And when the day came for her show with the stranger, she backed out at the last minute and he got pissed, called the whole thing off, and went and slept with the woman down the street. They ended up getting into a huge fight, and that's when he broke things off with her for not being honest about what she wanted in the relationship. She then told me, "I just got so nervous thinking about a complete stranger screwing me. I'm just not that type of person, and there's very few guys I would just let do that to me. Present company included, of course." I actually cringed at that last remark, and then reminded her that I was seeing someone for almost a year at that point. A comment that she pretty much ignored. I got the impression at this point that in her head, just because me and Elle hadn't met in person, that meant our relationship was somehow less real. She also told me how they'd slept together a few times since then, but knew that he was only coming around whenever the other girl was busy or didn't want to have sex. She also told me that he'd been doing that to her anytime they worked the same shifts. He would just show up and glare at her until someone called him, and had been doing this for almost a month. I told her that she should really report him to the supervisors, but she decided that she could never do that, so I told her she should find a new job. She told me that she couldn't because at her previous place of employment, a popular national chain sandwich shop, apparently she had stolen from it and only avoided prosecution because she had made restitution, and because of her criminal record, there was really no other place that would hire her. There went that alarm again. Over the next few months, things just got absolutely worse. She would randomly walk up to me at work and then start talking about how we'd be great together, and how she always wanted a boyfriend like me, who was kind, thoughtful, a great listener, tall, handsome, yada yada yada. I would always cut her off with a short, not to mention spoken for, and she would just storm off. Alice would get all excited when we had to work together, and she would always post something along the lines of, "Working with OP today. Oh, how I love this man." And then tag me in the post, delete it before I could see it, but not before Elle did, who would eventually save a screenshot of it and, of course, send it to me. When I confronted Alice with this, she basically blew me off, saying that it really wasn't that big of a deal. I decided to unfriend her and then totally blocked her after this. Still, she would often walk up to me or tell me when we were working together about her favorite sexual positions, and also how much she apparently loves giving blowjobs for absolutely no reason. Like sitting on the couch and watching a movie and just giving you one because she wants to for no reason at all. These were her actual words, ladies and gentlemen. I'm not kidding. Now, I'd been in the Navy prior to this, so the content of these comments didn't really bother me so much, as I'd heard much worse from the mouths of the US Navy sailors. What did bother me though was if someone heard these incredibly one-sided conversations and then said something to Elle, just how much trouble that I'd be in with a woman that I'd grown to deeply care for. Not that there was much of a threat of that actually happening. I always told Elle whatever Alice would say to me, but still, it needed to stop. So I went to my direct supervisor and I asked him to not put me to work with Alice anymore, as there were a lot of issues there. I didn't go into detail as I didn't want her to lose her job, but I did say that I was uncomfortable with working with her. That's when things got really creepy. She then started texting me, and when I asked her how she got my number, she totally ignored the question. I decided to change my number, and a few days later she was texting me at my new number, and I changed it again and again. And again, within a few days, she was sending me messages yet again. I didn't keep the texts, and to this day, I have no idea how she was getting my numbers. Also, her texts were responses to in-person conversations that I had with other people. At one point, a friend and I were working 12-hour shifts, 7 a.m. to 7 p.m., and I had said something about how I was just going to order a pizza when I got home, and then grab a shower while I waited the 30+ minutes for the delivery guy. I then got a text from her later that night saying she had apparently overheard that I was getting a pizza, and suggested that I bring the pizza by her place so we could hang out. And another immediately after saying that when I got to her place, I would have to be naked, as she's a naturalist when she's at home, and she expects the same from her guests. Obviously, I ignored the text and blocked the number, only to get another message from her the next day from a different number. This one was a picture message of her in nothing but 3 slices of strategically placed pizza, telling me to pick which topping I'd like to eat first. In another instance, I was texting a friend of mine about heading to the mall that weekend to pick up a birthday present for a mutual friend and setting up a pickup time and such. Later that same day, I got a text from her saying she could give me a lift to the mall as she was going to Victoria's Secret to get some new lingerie, and that she needed someone to help her in and out of the lingerie as she tried it on. I got an email later that weekend that was a series of pictures from her in various states of undressed as she modeled her new lingerie for her camera. That week at work, I requested to be put on the weekend shifts permanently, as she worked the morning weekday shifts, and that would mean I would only have to see her once during the week and not really have to work with her other than that. Alice's response to seeing me less was to start showing up at places I was at. I went to a small party store in town where I could get a hard-to-find flavor of this brand of soda I like, and as I walked up to the register, Alice was suddenly there, just standing in the doorway. I paid for my sodas and then just kinda stood there. I didn't want to call the police and get myself tied up with legal issues since I was still planning to travel to Europe to spend some time with Elle, and I also didn't want to go home as I was afraid she would follow me home and then know where I lived. So I decided to just stand there, kind of just looking at her and not really sure what to do. That's when she suddenly turned around and then just left without saying a word or even purchasing anything. She also showed up one night at my favorite burger place, a little hole-in-the-wall bar, and sat down at my table right across from me, and actually had the gall to ask me if I was going to buy her dinner. I then moved to the bar, where I stayed until the bar closed at 3 a.m., and then some. The barkeep was actually a friend of mine who gave me a lift home. I caught her following me around a major chain superstore late at night, and when I finally shook her and was able to go home, I then got pictures sent to me of her masturbating in the pharmacy department. How she got away with that one, I'll never know. And honestly, I don't want to. Unfortunately, at this point, Elle's mother was diagnosed with final stage colon cancer, and she actually died less than 2 weeks later. Feeling like I really needed to be there for Elle, I got my documentation in order, bought a plane ticket, and put in my 2 weeks notice. I actually saw Alice twice more in my regular spots in the coming weeks as I prepared to depart for a 3-month stay to help Elle with anything she needed. Once outside my bank when I stopped to shift some funds around for my trip, and the other as I was getting some new socks and underwear and the like for the trip. She then walked up to me and actually recommended what she would like to see me wearing, before slithering away like a snake. A couple of weeks later, I was sitting in the airport terminal waiting for my plane, and I got a few texts from her asking if I was ready to man up and give her a couple of orgasms yet. I shook my head and just ignored it. 3 months later, I was back in the States just in time for the 4th of July. I didn't see Alice all summer, nor did I give her much thought. Elle came to visit at the end of September, and in November we actually got married after being together and traveling back and forth for about 3 years. Later that month, my hometown was holding their annual Christmas tree lighting ceremony. Elle had never been to one before and she really wanted to go, so we went. While we're standing there singing Christmas carols, me rather off-key, I then felt these arms wrap around me from behind and then clasp at my waist. Initially thinking it was Elle, I put my hand on hers about the same time that I realized that Elle was standing next to me, so she couldn't be the one wrapped around me, nor were these hands wearing her wedding ring. I pulled the person's hands away, twirled around, coming face to face with who else? It's Alice. She'd spotted me in the crowd and decided to say hi with some guy in tow. Elle turned around and Alice spotted her, and I could just see insanity just flash across her face. I then saw her take the hot cup of cocoa away from the guy with her, and I then pulled Elle slightly behind me as Alice lowered the cup as if to throw it all over Elle. I asked her who her date was and she just froze and then looked at him, and then quickly said that he wasn't a date, he was just a friend of hers. This seemed like news to him as he got really angry and then stormed away. I watched him go, and when I turned back to Alice, she was sizing up Elle, so I asked Elle if she could get me a cup of that hot cocoa. Elle left, and then Alice asked, So, still dating her, huh? I then responded, no, we're actually married now. Alice froze, looked me dead in the eye, and then recited my address, described the entire layout of my bedroom in extensive detail, and then promised that she would show me what real Americans do to Euro trash, before she then ran off into the dark night. Elle and I stayed at my parents' house the last few days we were there. I called the cops, but nothing ever came of it. What do you know? I also called my former landlord and told him he should be on the lookout for someone trying to break into the empty apartment. At the end of November, we got on a plane bound for Portugal, and I left Alice behind. Me and Elle now have a baby named for Elle's mother. I feel really bad for whoever Alice latches onto next, but I'm really glad that there's an entire ocean between us now. And Alice, if you're out there and you're reading this, please, for the love of God and all that is holy, let's never, and I mean ever, meet again. Tonight, I went to Walmart by myself. I'm a 19-year-old female, 5'4" and 125 pounds. Not very big or intimidating. I really wanted my sister to come with me, as I just felt kinda weird about going alone. She refused, so that leads us to what happened next. It was around 7 p.m. when I got there. I only had to get a few groceries. As I was headed to the self-checkouts, I walked past a man. He looked to be around my age, around 5'10" and maybe 200 pounds. We made eye contact and I gave him a smile, as that's just what I do whenever I make eye contact with strangers. After walking past him, he started to follow me. It sketched me out a little until he followed me to the self-checkouts. There were at least 4 to 5 open ones, but he chose the one right next to me. I was a little more weirded out at this point, but just tried to scan my stuff as quickly as possible. I heard him mumbling something, but I said nothing, as I was hoping he just wouldn't talk to me. Then he came up beside me, way too close for comfort. He asked if I had a name, and asked if I was with friends or alone, and then he asked if I wanted to chill. The whole time he was speaking, he spoke low and mumbled his words. He kept coming closer and closer to me. I'm already an anxious person by nature, but this genuinely scared me. He inched his way around to the front of the self-checkout so that I could no longer scan anything. Keep in mind, the entire time that he was asking me questions, I didn't look at him, nor did I stop scanning my items. Once in front of me, he asked if he could have a kiss on the cheek. He was so close that he honestly could have dove in and gave me one. I was shaking, and I told him no. He asked for my Snapchat multiple times, in different ways. Every time I told him no, and I asked him to please move and let me finish scanning my items. He finally walked away and grabbed a few of his items. The entire time that I paid for my groceries, my hands were shaking and I was trying not to cry. I may sound dramatic about this, but this was one of the scariest interactions that I've ever had. Sure, I've had some weird guys hit on me, but no one has ever invaded my personal space this heavily and made me feel as anxious as this man did. I'm going to work on becoming less nervous and more assertive, so when things like this happen, I can speak up more. I had a weird feeling about going out alone tonight, and this may have been why. He was my first kiss, and also my first abusive relationship. We first started dating when I was a preteen. He was super attentive and protective of me from the very beginning. It wasn't until the 5th month when I started noticing the alarms going off loudly in my head. He had taken me on a cute roller skate date, and we had sat down for a bit to take a break when 2 of his friends showed up. At this point, the vibe from him was no longer safe. The smile he had 5 minutes beforehand was replaced with a look of pure hatred. He switched into this odd predator mode and told me to kiss him with tongue in front of his friends. I told him that I was just not ready to do something like that, and especially not in front of other people. He didn't really like that answer, and he pulled my face up to his and then started forcing his tongue deep into my mouth. I was a pretty small girl, but luckily I was able to push him away long enough to start running towards a more populated part of the skate rink. I told him to stay away from me while I waited for my mom to pick me up. I didn't tell my mom what happened because I was in complete shock and confused. I was young, and I didn't want to get in trouble for kissing a boy, so I decided to just ignore him until I was able to process everything. About a week of successfully avoiding him at school passes when he's worked up the nerve to try something yet again. He found me surrounded by a group of my friends and decided to try his luck. I didn't even notice that he was there until we were practically bumping elbows. Being that close to him definitely put me on edge, and I nearly crapped myself when he started speaking to me. It was all pointless small talk until he realized I wasn't in the forgiving mood, and then his mood totally shifted like before, and he just started staring at me like I was the most disgusting human on the planet. I was holding one of those portable CD players when he yanked it out of my hands and started trying to shove it in his bag in an attempt to steal it. I yelled at him to give it back and tried prying it from him, which he apparently took offense to because he punched me in the face with enough force to drop me to the ground. I obviously started crying and we were both sent to the principal's office. Now, his dad was the football coach in that Midwestern community, so he was able to talk the principal into only requiring his son to attend detention once for his punishment. We didn't really see each other too much after that, and thankfully we ended up going to different high schools. Then I ran into him at my Taco Bell drive-thru my sophomore year. I didn't really realize he was the cashier until I was at the window about to pay, when he made awkward eye contact. I pretended to not recognize him and hurried with the transaction until I was able to speed away. Unfortunately, he saw our chance meeting as some kind of sign of fate, and he attempted to send the equivalent of a "you up" text to my Facebook. Unfortunately, I can never unsee his ultra cringy attempt at flirting. "I think I saw you at Taco Bell today. I was the cashier. You're pretty cute still, and I was wondering if you wanted to send some booty pics." My response was an immediate block. I made sure to let my sisters know all about the incident because I just had to tell someone. If I had known then just how dangerous this teenage boy would become, I wouldn't have taken any of the incidents so lightly. But I'm not a psychic. After some awkward laughs, I moved on with my life and continued to date less crappy people. Fast forward to today, when my sister sends me an article from her local news report featuring my dear first boyfriend's picture. Apparently, he decided to stab someone in the throat at a popular venue when they tried defending a woman that he was physically attacking. We dated nearly 10 years ago, but I still can't shake the feeling that I totally dodged a bullet. It's a really strange feeling when you realize that dangerous people are weaving in and out of your life without you even knowing before it's too late sometimes. According to the comments in the article, he had a really bad habit of assaulting the women in his life and had a history with obsessive stalking. I imagine justice will be served pretty swiftly due to the manner of the crimes and the overwhelming evidence supporting a case against this psychopath. Hopefully I don't cross paths with him ever again. I'm 20 years old and a front desk agent at a mid-range hotel in a small East Coast city. I'm a full-time student at the university, and I live alone in a one-bedroom apartment in a neighborhood made up of mostly college students. At the hotel, I've had to deal with a fair amount of unpleasant or creepy people, since a young woman in a customer service job seems like an easy target. I was used to old ladies yelling at me or inappropriately aged men making remarks on my appearance like, "You just have the most adorable smile. I'm sure you're a heartbreaker." And I've usually been able to deflect them. When I work on weekdays, I'm always on the 3 p.m. to 11 p.m. shift where we handle the check-ins. It was a slow night where we only had 28 check-ins to deal with, and by 8 p.m., my coworker Mindy and I had done all of our tasks and were leaning over the front desk, chatting and watching the news which blared perpetually from the TVs in the lobby's breakfast area. We only really had a handful of check-ins left, so we had kicked back with our deck of cards and Chinese takeout all over the desk. A younger man checked in, and I remember thinking he was pretty cute. He had neat blonde hair, a boyish smile, and a weak chin, and he was wearing khakis and a quarter-zip fleece. We had a pretty regular interaction, save for him making a lot of eye contact and smiling, and then he went to his room. About a half an hour later, he came back down and he asked us where he could get some alcohol. We told him the convenience store across the street had beer and wine, and he and I joked a little bit about how it was closing soon, so he better make a run for it if he wants any. When he came back, he slid a 40-ounce across the desk toward me. With my customer service smile of vague cluelessness, I said, what's this?
It's for you.
He leaned against the desk. Front desk agents have to stand up, so the top tier of the desk was about chest height, and when he leaned over, he was right in my face. Oh, I can't drink right now, but thank you. I think you should be the one to enjoy that. He was pretty insistent, and I agreed that I would drink it after work. I then went into the office and I put it with Mindy's stuff. She'd probably appreciate the free alcohol, but I didn't feel too good about drinking a 40 from some too friendly random guy. He hung around the desk for quite a while. Mindy is the type of person who can keep someone talking for hours, even if they don't want to, because her brain never runs out of content and she treats everyone like she's known them for years. This meant that this guy, who I'll call Mr. Hanson, wasn't going to be leaving anytime soon. They were talking about politics, and I heard him throw around some vaguely conservative rhetoric, but I pretended to just be caught up in my homework. He kept glancing over at me and trying to smile, but it was getting late. My feet hurt. All I wanted was to be at home in my underwear rolling a spliff with my cats all around me, instead of allowing some 35-year-old to think that he could flirt with me. At one point, Mindy had to make a phone call, so he slid down the desk toward me. I then looked up with my customer service smile right back on.
So, go to a small liberal arts college, do you?
My uniform shirt was short-sleeved, so you could see a couple of my tattoos on my arm, and I also have a nose piercing. So I assumed that and the music theory homework that I was working on informed his guess. No, I go to the university of the state we're in. The city's main attraction, besides its hippies and breweries, was my college. A pretty good state school, so it was somewhat surprising that he didn't assume that I went there instead. He was sizing me up, and I just absolutely prayed that Mindy would be done with her phone call soon. But it was her long-distance boyfriend, and she had wandered into the back office to talk to him. He started talking about his experiences at his Southern University, and how he was a veteran but got injured. So he lived off pension or something and didn't want to work and was just touring New England right now. The conversation somehow turned to his love life. But I'm pretty sure I was so spaced out by that point, thinking about how I was going to eat at least an entire frozen pizza when I got home, that I didn't pay attention to what he was saying until it was clear he asked me a question.
Would you do that?
He asked. Would I do what?
Get freaked out because I don't work. A lot of the chicks I date think it's weird.
I remember exactly what he said because I thought it was weird how he called girls chicks and how he spat it out. I laughed nervously and said, I don't know. I don't think so. The hotel was on the smaller side, and I was very aware of the fact that Mindy and I were the only employees in the building right then. He began to ask me probing questions about my love life along the lines of,
Are you single? No? Well, why do you like him? Why would you like him if he moved away? Do you think you'll be with him for a long time?
That last question really freaked me out, and I wish I had asked him to stop asking me personal questions like that. But I'm polite to a fault, even when I'm not working. So I just kept smiling and laughing and giving friendly but impersonal answers.
You're very warm,
he told me.
Have you ever worked with kids?
He talked about how a lot of the girls that he dates, back wherever he was from, Ohio maybe, are really shallow and materialistic, and how I seemed like such a down-to-earth girl and I was such a cutie. And did I know about the girl next door trope? I'm like the girl next door, but cool, he told me. I imagine he was referring to my tattoos again. Guest reviews are hugely important in the hospitality business, so at this hotel we're strictly trained to let guests treat you however they want. You just can't upset them. It probably would have been reasonable at this point to ask him to leave the front desk, but I felt so helpless, and being assertive with people at work is so against my instinct that it didn't even cross my mind to say anything. Because of this, I had to just stay there listening to this guy and politely accepting all of his compliments. I assumed he typically got away with it since he was attractive and clean-cut with a slight baby face. I kept praying for the phone to ring and for someone to ask me to perform some kind of complicated long task so I could get away. But the only time it did was when a neighboring hotel called to ask if we had printer ink. Mindy was on the phone in the back until eventually Sam, our night auditor, finally arrived, and I realized that this guy had monopolized the entire last 2 hours of my shift, trying to get me to sleep with him. Hoping Mr. Hansen would take this as a cue to leave, I went to the office and I got my coat and my backpack. When I came back out to witness Sam count the drawer, Mr. Hansen was still standing there. "Well, I hope you have a good night," I said to him.
Are you walking out this way?
He gestured down the hallway, which led to all of the rooms as well as the door to the back parking lot. I told him I had parked out front, which thankfully was true, and I was able to get to my car successfully. I sat there for a while responding to the text that had piled up on my phone while Mr. Hansen was diverting my attention. It was about a 10-minute drive from the hotel to my apartment downtown, and I noticed that a car was pulling out of the parking lot at the same time I was. It wasn't Mindy's car. She always stayed an extra half hour after her shift technically ended, but there was another hotel next door, so I assumed it was just an employee or guest there. I wasn't too concerned when the Nissan was right behind me, but I noticed it had Florida plates, which isn't too abnormal. A lot of the rental cars around here do. I take a really weird way to get across town after work, which involves cutting through the University Hospital's enormous needlessly parking lot, which spans about 3 blocks. It wasn't necessarily a quicker route, but I liked how there were never any cars there this time of night, and I could also go as fast as I wanted to. The parking lot, as I said, is needlessly complex, which means stoplights which all turn into blinking yellows after 9 p.m. There's also medians and grassy areas placed seemingly at random, and a lot of twists and turns which all go to very specific buildings and exits. I'm explaining this parking lot in so much detail just to express just how strange it was that this rental car was following me this pretty nonsensical route. It's not a way that any kind of maps app would take you, since there's more straightforward streets surrounding the parking lot. I initially assumed that it was just someone going to the hospital, since it was the only major medical facility in about a 100-mile radius, and the only well-funded one in an even larger area. A lot of people and their families stayed at the hotel who were there for the hospital, so the momentary explanation I gave myself seemed pretty feasible. It was maintaining a polite distance, but it was one of those cars with the ultra-bright LED lights, which were totally blinding in my mirrors, so the car was pretty impossible to ignore. It followed me around each turn, and at one point, just to see, I went in a big circle around the south half of the lot. Surely enough, the other car made the same exact circle. My explanation, which was already crumbling, dissolved completely when I drove past the entrances to the both main hospital and the emergency room. Now, steady consumption of crime shows, scary movies, and true crime Reddit pages have made me a very paranoid person. So it was at that point where I picked up that something was probably wrong. I figured I should avoid going back to my real apartment, especially since it's practically begging to be broken into, with a lot of windows and a very old front door that opens directly to the outside. Obviously at this point, I was relatively certain that it was Mr. Hansen. Like I said, I've had guests cross the line before, but I had never been followed or particularly fixated on. A hotel receptionist, even if they're good looking, is someone you have a couple of brief and pleasant interactions with, but you don't really think about them when they're not there. I decided my best bet would be to get back to the hotel. I looped back through town, the Nissan following me at a polite distance. I'll reiterate, he was trying to be as discreet as he could, keeping as far behind me as he could while still keeping me in sight. He wasn't trying to intimidate me so much as, I'm not sure, monitor me maybe? Whatever his reasons, I was still afraid. I abandoned the use of turn signals and totally sped back to the hotel, calling the hotel along the way and asking Sam if he and possibly the security guard that we contracted to patrol the property after 11 p.m. could then meet me at the front door. When I arrived back at the hotel, I pulled around to the front, where Sam and the security guard were then standing near the parking lot. I explained the situation and the security guard went out the back door to look for the car and its driver. When he came back, he said that he spoke to a preppy blonde guy outside who was coming inside. He had said that he had just been out to smoke a cigarette and was now returning to his room. Security had asked him if he had seen a Nissan with Florida plates, and he said that he hadn't. There really wasn't much more that we could do at that point. Luckily for me, I wouldn't be working for a couple of days after Mr. Hansen was set to check out, and we were fully sold that weekend, so he couldn't extend his stay even if he wanted to. All guests are asked upon check-in to write down make, model, and color and plate of their vehicle on their registration card. So just to confirm, I decided to pull out his registration card. Sure enough, silver Nissan Altima with Florida plates. Here's exactly what he wrote on his TripAdvisor review.
Absolutely great stay. Room was clean, breakfast was hot, and that's really all I can ask for. The best thing about this hotel, though, was the staff. I had a lovely time with the two ladies at the front desk, especially a very sweet girl. Hope to be seeing you sooner rather than later.
So, Mr. Hansen, I don't think we'll be meeting anytime soon because my manager put you on the banned list. And thank God he did. One summer night, my roommate and I were both sitting on the couch of our living room talking and watching Supernatural. Two ladies in our 20s, we felt safe with just the unlocked screen door closed a few feet away from us as I sat facing the window to our backyard. Now, I'll say this, we weren't completely naive. We had the back porch light on and lived in a townhouse facing a ravine. So for anyone to get back there, they would have to walk past either 10 other houses on the left side or 5 other houses on the right. It wasn't the safest area around as it housed mostly students from our nearby university. But hey, we all knew the dealers by name. They were our buddies. This is also why my roommate didn't really freak out right away when I began yelling. She thought that I was just joking around with a drunk friend. So the stage is set. Now to the creepy part. I was sitting facing the window, and my roommate faced me, so her back was to it. I was the only person to have actually seen him. At first, I thought my mind was just playing tricks on me. I had smoked a little of the devil's lettuce earlier that evening. Just at the edge of the window, I could see the smiling of a middle-aged man. But before I could register what I was seeing, the face then backed up out of view. Not wanting to freak out my roommate just in case it was nothing, I went silent and got up to look out the back door that was to the left of the window. And there, I saw an image that has been burned into my brain to this day, 5 years later. An obese old man wearing nothing but a black flat cap, then started walking up the 2 steps of my porch toward my unlocked screen door. I then yelled at the top of my lungs something like, "Get the heck out of here! I'm calling the cops!" The part that stuck with me is the fact that he just held up his hand in an appeasing gesture, and kind of silently chuckled as he backed up, a big grin on his face the whole time. Like it was all just some funny misunderstanding that he was naked in my backyard and about to come into my house. My roommate never saw him, which I'm glad for, but she got kinda mad at me that I didn't tell her what I suspected was going on at the time. We called the cops and about 3 officers showed up to the house and searched the area, but they didn't find anyone. The part that still really freaks me out is just how long he was standing out there listening to us. I don't really know if he would have tried to open the door, but the fact that he could have just terrified me. I rationalize it now, thinking he just wanted a reaction, and I'm glad I gave him an angry one instead of a scared one. Who really knows what would have happened if I reacted scared? Anyway, hopefully I don't encounter any more scary old naked men. Now, this all began when I broke up with my boyfriend of about 1 year about a month ago. There's several reasons why I broke up with him, but the main reason is because I didn't like the way he was treating me. I behaved like I was his property, and he also called me really terrible, vulgar names. He was also physically abusing me. I could no longer handle it, so I finally broke up with him. Everything seemed okay until he started calling me and sending me venomous text messages. Texts that were like, "You're just a cheap whore no one should care about," and "I hate you. I don't know why I ever went out with you in the first place." I eventually deleted and blocked his number. His number is from one of those apps, and he told me that he had no social media. About a week ago, I saw him at my college and he saw me. And I'll never forget the expression of rage mixed with insanity that was all over his face as he came towards me. I ran faster than I had ever run in a long time. A few days later, I saw him sitting in his truck in the parking lot of the college. That's when my best friend and I decided that it would be best to then report him to public safety. When we did, I learned all sorts of things that I never knew. That he either lied to me about his name, or that he also went to the same college as I did. I'm absolutely terrified that he's going to be there again. All I can really do is just hope he won't come terribly close to me. The story takes place during my senior year of high school, when I still lived at home with my mom. It was a Saturday, so I slept in, as any teenager normally does. And my mom left for work early that morning, so I had spent my day at home all alone. I decided to do some cleaning around the house when I realized we were out of paper towels. So I decided to go down to the garage to get some, since that's usually where we kept extra things. My mom lives in a 3-story townhome where the main floor is on the 2nd floor, and the 1st floor is just a small entryway at the bottom of the stairs and 2 doors. One is the front door, and the other one leads to the garage. So I walked down the stairs and opened the door to the garage, going to flip on the lights but then realizing I didn't need to. The garage door was wide open and letting in a ton of daylight. Maybe to some this wouldn't be a big deal, but my mom lives in a not great part of town and is pretty adamant about closing the garage door when she leaves. I remember feeling really weird about it since it was so unusual, but chalked it up to my mom just not realizing it, or maybe something had rolled under the door so the automatic sensor couldn't completely close, and maybe my mom just drove away without realizing. I then looked over into the dark corner of the garage where the boxes were stacked and the paper towels were stored. For some reason, I couldn't get myself to walk over there and grab them. I do have a slight fear of the dark, so I figured that caused my sudden hesitation. I just stood in the doorway and pressed the garage door button on the wall and watched it close completely. I made sure that nothing blocked it from closing, and I waited a good 10 seconds before leaving to make sure that it was really shut this time. I switched off the light, walked back inside, and then locked the door to the garage. I took maybe about 2 steps up the stairs before I heard boxes tumbling, scuffling of feet, and the audible sound of someone hitting their hand against the garage door opener, and then the mechanical sound of the garage door actually opening. I noped it up the rest of the flight of stairs, then just stood at the top step for probably about 20 minutes, just totally shaking. It wasn't until my mom got home asking me why the garage door was left open that I went back down. Other than my mom's car now in the garage, it's completely empty, except for the boxes in the corner where we typically store extra things for the house. I looked and saw that the boxes were toppled over, and I had to explain the situation to my mom. I'm really glad that my gut told me not to go into the dark corner of the garage. And to whoever decided to creep in there, Please just stay away.